Should Missouri fans expect Sam Horn to be the starter at quarterback from day one? And also, believe it or not, we might owe a certain embattled head basketball coach a thank you for helping secure Luther Burden. All this and more on this signing day edition of Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And thanks, as always, for making this your first listen of the podcast day. We are free and available on all platforms. And today's episode is brought to you by Sonos. Sonos is the official sponsor of ESPN College Football. Go to Sonos.com to learn more. And appropriately, Sam Horn was the first name to come through on the old fax machine. And I do mean that, the old fax machine. Is that still something we use for official letters for college football? Well, it sounds like it. I think maybe high school kids faxing in their official letters along with the financial world, maybe the last bastion of the fax machine. But as I said, Sam Horn, your first signee, and that made me think, and it made apparently a lot of people think out on YouTube. In fact, good old Terry, boy, what a fine commenter he is. A very regular commenter. Well, he took me to task the other day saying, well, you just don't get it. Sam Horn's going to be the starter from day one. And I have to say, I'm a big fan of Sam Horn's talent. I really think he's got a great arm. I think he throws well on the move. And clearly, also like Tyler Macon before him, the guy's a winner as well. Horn actually rocking the Block M Mizzou towel. Saw that post game after he won the Georgia 7A state championship. But I just think the idea that, oh, Sam's definitely going to start next year from day one. Wow, let's pump the brakes just a little bit here, because who was the last player for Missouri to actually start at quarterback as a true freshman, especially from day one, right? But even a little bit, who started at quarterback as a true freshman? Well, it certainly wasn't Chase Daniel. It wasn't James Franklin. It wasn't Blaine Gabbert. It wasn't Drew. Well, wait, Drew Lock did start as a true freshman. How did that go, by the way? Middle of the season, Drew Lock had to take over as a true freshman behind a patchwork offensive line and without any skill position players. And, well, we had the worst offense in the country. Then before that, I think you got to go all the way back to the early 90s with Jeff Handy, the Bob Stull era. Jeff started quite a few games for Missouri that year. That Missouri team was terrible, absolutely horrifically bad. Then you got to go back even further, I think, to the late 70s. Correct me if I'm wrong here, any of you Mizzou historians out there. But Phil Bradley started at quarterback that season too. And while Bradley would eventually go on to be an all Big 8 caliber player, that certainly was not his best season. The point is, though, the idea, just there's not a lot of precedent in the last 30 years or so, or even 40 years, for a Missouri quarterback to be starting as a true freshman, fresh off the boat, if you will, from high school football. It just doesn't happen very often. Could Sam Horn be that special Trevor Lawrence level talent that is good enough to start from day one out of high school? Well, maybe. It just seems really, really unlikely. So Terry and all you people out there, maybe slow your roll just a little bit. Now, on the other hand, there's another young man who signed today who I very much do expect to start from day one, and that's wide receiver Luther Burden, of course, the number one rated high school wide receiver in the country, according to most outlets. I think truly I'd be almost surprised if he wasn't a starter from day one next year. Listen, wide receiver is a different position than quarterback. That's a tough one to transition from. Quarterback is as tough as any position there is out there in all of sports. But receiver, if you're the type of athlete that Burden is, I think he can come in and make an immediate impact in that Missouri wide receiver room. I think he can start at the outside receiver spot, maybe in the slot, wherever you want to put him. Honestly, I think he's that talented. And I think without a doubt, he's going to be Missouri's punt returner next season. And there's a spot where we've lacked an explosive element since at least Marcus Murphy. So that'll be a nice addition to that special teams unit as well in the form of Luther Burden. But if you listen to Eli Drinkwitz, he's excited about this entire wide receiver class. He very specifically mentioned, he said, I don't know that there's a better 3 receivers in the country than Luther Burden, Jamarian Wayne, and Mekhi Miller. So hopefully it's not just Burden. Hopefully at least one of those other 2 guys can maybe bust out next season or very soon for Missouri as well, because we could definitely need a lot of help in that receiver room. By the way, there is one more skill position player I could very much see hitting the field next season as a true freshman, and that's running back Tavoris Jones from Texas. And obviously Jones is a really talented kid, the top-ranked running back out of the state of Texas as a high school player. But to me, I think Eli Drinkwitz and the Missouri staff told us last season that, at least for last year, they aren't in love with any of their younger running backs. You saw Tyler Beatty obviously take 85, 90% of the load, but even as the season went along, you saw Eli Young's reps basically disappear at a certain point. Dawson Downing was basically your pass protection specialist. And then even Mike Cox, obviously the former walk-on, ended up being the de facto second string running back at a certain point. So if you're Eli Young, if you're Taj Butts, if you're any of the young running backs on the Missouri roster, you got a bit of an indication that maybe the staff isn't in love with any of you yet. So Tavoris Jones, I think, has a real chance this fall to get on the field early for Missouri. I really do. And while overall it's mostly good news today for the Missouri football team, Missouri did lose some recruiting battles today. So I want to tell you more about that. We got to get to the bad news as well. But first, I'll give you some good news. I've been telling you about PrizePicks for a while now. And if you haven't signed up, frankly, what are you waiting for? Because PrizePicks is the leader in college sports daily fantasy, offering more college football and basketball props than anyone in the world, and offering all the star players of the Power Five and the high majors, as well as mid-major players you might not have even heard of. So guess what? All of our users that deposit and use the promo code Locked On will receive an instant deposit match up to $100. Again, just be sure to use the promo code Locked On. PrizePicks is safe and offers fast withdrawals, and entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's truly that easy. So don't hesitate. Check out prizepicks.com. Use the promo code Locked On, or go to the App Store and download the app today. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. All right, folks, this is it. The putt to win the tournament. If you sink it, the championship is yours. But on your backswing, your hat falls over your eyes. Is this how you're running your business? Poor visibility because you're still relying on spreadsheets and outdated finance software. Tisk, tisk. To see the full picture, you need to upgrade to NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud financial system to power your growth with visibility and control of your financials, inventory, HR, budgeting, and more. NetSuite is everything you need to grow your business all in one place. With NetSuite, you can automate all your processes, close your books in no time while staying well ahead of your competition. Over 27,000 businesses already use NetSuite, and right now through the end of the year, NetSuite is offering a one-of-a-kind financing program to those ready to upgrade at netsuite.com/LockedOnNCAA. Head to netsuite.com/LockedOnNCAA for special year-end financing on the #1 financial system for growing businesses. That's netsuite.com/LockedOnNCAA. Apparently, everybody Missouri expected to sign today indeed signed, with the notable exception of Deshaun Woods. I'm talking specifically about the high school players here. Deshaun Woods, the four-star offensive lineman who spurned his home state, Nebraska Cornhuskers, for Missouri. Well, apparently he needs some things to be taken care of academically at this point, so he is not yet eligible to sign. The plan is for him to sign in February now during the later signing period. So something to worry about, certainly. Who knows? Perhaps he could go the junior college route. But I guess if you're a Missouri fan, I guess you take solace in the fact that he isn't decommitting from Missouri or anything like that. Nothing to worry about on that front. But apparently he does need to get some of his academic house in order before he signs with Missouri. Now, a couple more notes here. Zion Young, a Georgia defensive end, was down to Missouri and Michigan State. Well, he just announced today he's signing with the Spartans. So if you want to be a pessimist, you can look and say, well, there haven't been any commitments for, maybe a month and a half, couple months now, something like that. By the way, Demetrius Pancake Hunter, another offensive line prospect who is down to Missouri and Houston and one other school that's escaping me now, I believe Oklahoma. Well, Demetrius Hunter committed to Houston. Again, anytime you miss out on a kid whose nickname is Pancake Hunter, that's a disappointment. But seriously, he was a good prospect as well. And I guess if you're going to be a pessimist, you can say, man, Missouri sure has lost some close battles here on the football recruiting front in the last month or so. Certainly today, they lost basically all the 50-50 battles. But you know what? I think overall, while sure, maybe Missouri's disappointing play in 2021 cost them in a couple specific cases today. Who knows, to be honest. But overall, I think you've got a top 15, class nationally by all accounts. I just think you have to be really, really happy as a Mizzou fan overall when it comes to recruiting. Or maybe there's some other things we can worry about. Sure. But when it comes to recruiting, I think it's all systems go on the Eli Drinkwitz program. Now, one final recruiting battle for this early signing period that's yet to be decided is that of Boonville defensive lineman DJ Wesolak, who, as of a couple days ago, certainly the scuttlebutt was that Missouri felt like they were in good shape with Wesolak. However, he did just take a visit to LSU and new coach Brian Kelly. So I will say that from my perspective, I think anything's possible here with Wesolak. We'll have a breakdown of whatever he decides to do tomorrow on the program here. I believe he's going to announce here. It's about 2:15 as I record here. He's going to make his announcement in about an hour and a half or so. But to me, Wesolak, it sure seems like he's a guy who's wanted to get out of the mid-Missouri area for a while. So if he decides to take LSU's offer, take maybe USC's offer, if that's a committable offer, I'm not sure. It sure seems like LSU would certainly take him, though. They wouldn't take an official visit from him at this point, I don't think. So while Missouri feels like they're in pretty good shape with him, I wouldn't count our chickens before we've hatched yet. I just get a feeling with that young man that really anything's possible. And also, notably, he's actually been downgraded a bit by the recruiting services. And I think he's gone from, I believe, a 4-star to a 3-star player over at rivals.com. I think some of that is just a little bit of a lack of production. He doesn't play at the highest level of high school football in Missouri by any stretch of the imagination. And I just think maybe some people are starting to wonder why he didn't dominate a little bit more at that level. So certainly, if you're a Missouri fan, be happy if Wesolak signs with Missouri. But if he doesn't, also no real reason to panic whatsoever, in my humble opinion. And of course, with all this recruiting news on the table, even Eli Drinkwitz had to admit that he's been extremely busy with recruiting this week. But of course, the bowl game is happening in exactly 1 week. So what has Missouri been up to in terms of practice? Well, let's talk about that Armed Forces Bowl. But first, I want to tell you about one of our fine sponsors, and that's BetOnline.ag. And hey, speaking of that Armed Forces Bowl, Missouri's still a 3.5-point underdog over at betonline.ag against the Army Black Knights. So not a lot of movement there. Caleb Evans didn't move the line, him deciding to opt out of the game. Tyler Beatty obviously opting into the game, but Missouri's still a decided underdog here. What do you think? Do the Tigers have a chance? Well, you tell me, and more importantly, tell the bookies over at betonline.ag. Check out their new and updated desktop website, the mobile website as well. Head there today. When you sign up, be sure to use the promo code Locked On for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. And by the way, they have everything from the NBA to the NHL, boxing, UFC, your favorite Vegas casino games. They've got it all. But when you sign up, just be sure to use the promo code Locked On for your 50% welcome bonus at BetOnline, where the game starts. And by Built Bar. Yes, this holiday season, grab the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, or frankly, sometimes even better than a candy bar. Built Bar is filled with so much holiday goodness, rich with decadent flavor, covered in chocolate, but amazingly low in calories, sugar, net carbs, and fat. And of course, it's high in protein as well. You get the best of both worlds with Built Bar. Delicious and healthy. So tell Santa to throw a few Built Bars in your stocking this season. But when you do, tell Santa when he goes to BuiltBar.com to use the promo code LOCKED15 so he'll get 15% off his next order. Once again, that's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. By the way, Eli Drinkwitz mentioned that Konzo Martin was actually instrumental in Missouri's recruitment of Luther Burden because of Martin's relationship with Luther Burden Sr., of course, Luther's father. So interesting to note there, Konzo landing probably the biggest recruit he's gotten since Michael Porter Jr. And you know what? He didn't even have to hire his dad to be an assistant coach. So got to be Konzo Martin's biggest win as a recruiter so far in his tenure at Missouri. I mentioned how busy Eli Drinkwitz has to be these last couple weeks and moving forward here through bowl season and recruiting season. But one thing I thought of this week is it was made headlines that Scott Linehan, for instance, a former NFL coach, was hired as one of Missouri's offensive analysts this offseason. But of course, we really have heard absolutely nothing about Scott Linehan or from Scott Linehan certainly since. But I have to say, considering how much time not only Eli, but surely many members of our coaching staff are spending on recruiting during this period here, I got to think this is the time when guys like Scott Linehan and that offensive analyst staff, well, they got to earn their money this week because they're simply guys like Drinkwitz and all the recruiting efforts they put in. They probably don't have as much time to watch film and really break down Army, come up with a game plan as much as they would like. They're just only so many hours in the day. And also just this condensed schedule here with the bowl game coming up so quickly. Also, finals week is this week. That's complicating things as well. But of course, Army has similar issues as well, if not worse, because their schedule is even more condensed. And apparently on the defensive side of the ball, I'm not really sure how much you can even prepare for the actual Army attack in this amount of time, other than what Darius Robinson said. Missouri defensive tackle Darius Robinson said, this week's practices for the defensive line have largely focused on defeating the cut blocks Army uses to create holes in its run-heavy attack. And certainly, if you remember the 2009 Texas Bowl, well, my goodness, Missouri's front seven was cut blocked to death by the triple option attack of the cadets that day. Certainly, you can expect almost the exact same thing from Army, but I will say Army does spread it out a little bit, runs some more conventional shotgun type offense on occasion as well. But yeah, lots of cut blocks. And if you're not used to that, if you don't like that as a defensive lineman, it could definitely be a long day. No question about that. And by the way, one final note here, 2 Missouri players on the Associated Press All-American team. No shock there that Tyler Beatty made second team. Center Michael Maietti made third team as well. Somehow Harrison Mevis not in the top 5. I don't know. Very strange. It seems like certain people have recognized how great Mevis has been, and others seem to have dinged him because, I don't know, Missouri was sort of disappointing. I don't know. Not sure how that was Harrison Mevis's fault, but regardless, good to see Tyler Beatty getting all of his props. But I will say, by the way, speaking of Beatty, one final thing here. Mel Kiper came out with his initial top 15 or so running back list, and Tyler Beatty didn't make it. I got to say, I thought that was shocking. To me, if Tyler Beatty isn't a third, fourth, fifth round pick somewhere in there, I'd truly be shocked, and I think that would be a huge mistake by the NFL. Last season, Larry Roundtree was a 6th round pick. There's a pretty good baseline right there. I'd be shocked if Beatty doesn't go higher than Roundtree in the draft. Let's put it that way. So I thought that was kind of a mistake by Mel Kiper. But you know what? He knows the draft better than I do. So we shall see what happens. You know what? Here's what's going to happen on the next Locked On Mizzou. We got more to talk about on recruiting. Of course, we'll have DJ Wesolak's decision, the Boonville Star, and lots more on Locked On Mizzou as well. And also be sure to make your second listen Locked On Bets with your boy Q and Lee Sterling. If you want to actually get some good betting advice, well, those are your guys without question. They are free and available on all platforms. So until next time, I am John Miller, and this has been Locked On Mizzou.